Welcome back to our Matriarchy Times podcast, Matriarchal Voices. For all of you who are listening today, I have exciting news. We have a very special guest, and I feel privileged to be able to have her here on our show. So, she's a figurehead in matriarchy and gynarchy. Her leadership and instruction has taken our journey towards the matriarchy to the next level, and many aspects of how we actually perceive matriarchy has been shaped and influenced by her work. So, without delaying this any further, please allow me to present Miss Viola Voltairine. Hi, Miss Viola. I'm very excited to be with you here today. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your work?
Hi, and thanks for letting me do this interview. I'm very excited about the initiatives with Matriarchy Times and really happy to be here. My name is Viola Voltairine, and I am an author and an educator and a certified sexologist, and I have degrees in film and have studied at the graduate level in Vedic studies. And so I have my fingers in a lot of different places. um, but my main topic of interest is gynarchy and creating a woman led world. I have written two books. One is 150 Years of Gynarchy, which is more focused on relationships, female led relationships, and the importance of starting gynarchy at home. The second, I expanded that to create a blueprint for communities run by women, gynarchic communities, and even broader than that, gynarchic society, and what that looks like, and how we would approach things like religion and economy and sociology and a lot of different topics. So that's been my life work for the last 7 or 8 years. Before that, I did run a BDSM dungeon in Chicago called Holy Mountain. And uh, between there and here, I had my daughter, and who is gender fluid, so my child. And um, so I am also a mother. I also run an online organization of women from all over the world, about 100 women from all across the planet. And we carefully vet submissive men who want to serve women. And it allows these women to explore ideas of control and power with willing men who really, really want to please women. Uh, and you have to be invited as a woman by one of the other women in the group. As a man, there's a way to find your way to us through finding passwords and such. And we don't want to make it too easy. We want only the men who are really enthusiastic about serving. But there is a way to find it. It's called The Company. You can listen to my podcast. I also have a podcast called Obedient Love, and you'll find little clues about how to join that. So that's another one of my projects. I've also started a project called the Women's Economy, and there's going to be a software aspect of that coming up in 2025, where I show women how to become financially independent without having to work for anyone else. Having their own online businesses, either coaching or selling products or teaching all sorts of ideas. They can become marketing agencies. They can do a number of different projects that will bring a solid income to them without having to leave the home, so that they can actually work from home or anywhere they want in the world, be their own boss, and be completely financially independent. So that's my goal for 2025, is to get more women to become their own boss and do that through a package of software and education. So that's called the Women's Economy, and that's a project I have coming up.
Thank you. That was very insightful. And I also hope that you will have more people tuning into the podcast, trying to code break their way into your inner circle. So I'd like to now move on to another concept I've heard you mention, which is the pivot, which I understand to be a kind of shift towards matriarchy and gynarchy. Would you be able to explain this a bit more?
So, one of the ideas that I like to write about and talk about is the pivot. And I call it the pivot because it's that moment where women in this era no longer need men to survive. We've pivoted from needing men to co sign on a bank account or run a business to flipping that where we no longer need them if we don't want them in our lives. That's a huge deal. And I don't know how many people realize how big of a jump that has been in the last 50 years. Now we can run our own communities without men. We can raise children without men. We don't need them, but many of us still want them, so that's important. But I talk about the pivot and I talk about how women are beginning to gain power not only in their own lives, but also in society as a whole, because we've begun to take on more powerful roles of authority and leadership.
Of course, there are already many homes which are female led, and this is unacknowledged. So, how do you think we can change this dynamic of how the leadership in the home is perceived to become more accepted and normal in the future?
Now, as I've said, my interest is in creating gynarchic communities and gynarchic society as a whole. So uh, I think to make that possible, we need to focus on several realms of our existence. One of those is the home, which is why I focus on coaching people in female led relationships. Gynarchy starts at home. Uh, Once that's instilled in the home, and whether or not you're raising children, but especially if you're raising children, to respect women as leaders, respect women's autonomy, and to revere women, then that changes within a couple of generations. That changes everything. So, another sphere is economics, which is why I am doing the women's economy and trying to make women completely independent financially, which since COVID and since the internet, we've been able to do in ways that were unthinkable before. So I think it's a really important thing to focus on the women's economy. So the women's economy is about making a commitment to allowing money to flow into the bank accounts of women, basically. So, women running businesses, women supporting each other's businesses, and men supporting women's businesses so that the flow of resources goes into women's pockets, basically. Another big area of importance is religion. And I think that patriarchy has been held up by religion for thousands of years, since the advent of Christianity, especially. The idea that the man is the head of the household and that he has a direct relationship with God, and the children are under the woman and the woman is under the man. This hierarchy that has been created by Abrahamic religion has been significant in holding patriarchy in place, and I think it is time to let that go. We have to release ourselves from that covenant, because if you look at the Old Testament, if you look at the Bible, you will see that the relationship with this male God is somewhat abusive. Not just somewhat, it is incredibly abusive. It is a dysfunctional relationship with a God who is angry, jealous, and that sets everyone up to consider that as the norm of leadership. This warlike, conquering, hierarchical relationship with deity is what keeps us where we are, and it creates war, it creates conflict. If we can let that go, the alternative is what I call the Devi doctrine, which I've written about in The Pillars of Gynarchy. The Devi doctrine acknowledges that all things are vibration and energy. This is something we know through physics. This is something we know through ancient religions, through the Vedas, through Sanatana Dharma in India and other places, that all things are energy, and that energy is the divine feminine in the Devi doctrine. Now, in the Devi doctrine, as I have written it in The Pillars of Gynarchy, all women are the embodiment of Devi. All women are portals through which human life emerges. And we cannot underestimate the importance of that, our role as portals. But it goes beyond reproduction. We are energetically the portals of erotic, creative energy. That is what our bodies are built for. And so the role of women is that of goddess. And the role of worship is something that is important to the human race. All across the board, we see this throughout the world. Worship is an important aspect of our existence. And we need it, and I'll tell you why we need it. We need it because ego is what allows us to feel separate from one another. And that's a good thing, because if we are if we are living in constant awareness of unity, it's harder to function. It's harder to function. People have reached enlightenment, so to speak, and they seem like their mind is out in outer space. So we need to be embodied here on earth in our roles as the sensory organs of Devi herself. We are here to collect information through our very unique perspective. So the ego allows us to do that. The ego allows us to have individuality, but we don't need that much ego. We just need to know that, I am Viola. I live here in Boulder, Colorado. I mean, very simple things that keep us involved with our own individuality. Beyond that, the ego can get out of control when it feels threatened, when it feels like your importance as an individual is threatened. Ego can become blown up, and that happens a lot. So what worship and devotion do, what their role is in our lives, is to bring ego back down, to be able to focus on something outside of ourselves, something larger than ourselves, and give someone else or something else our focus and attention and importance, basically. It keeps ego smaller, it keeps ego under control, and it makes for a better world because we are kinder to one another, acknowledging that we are not the center of it all. We are all sensing organisms. We are all sensing organs of a larger organism, spiritually speaking, and physically speaking, literally in our bodies on this planet. So that's the importance of worship. And women who choose to become living goddesses within the Devi doctrine allow men to have that focal point of worship, which for men is incredibly pleasurable, incredibly enlightening. It makes their lives better. It is a gift to them to allow them to have this focal point, to have purpose, and to get outside of their heads, get outside of themselves.
I like where this is going. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to and understand this dynamic in religion. It's, of course, a very sensitive topic and discussed at length on many occasions, but fear of the divine and divine retribution perhaps limits our understanding and willingness to see things from a different perspective. So, as you are one of those rare persons who speak openly, would you mind sharing more about your journey in religion and how you have come to where you are right now, enjoying freedom from oppressive religious beliefs?
Yeah, my own spiritual experience started unexpectedly. I was 18 years old. Most of my family were Christian, but my parents were not. They joined Scientology, which I'm not interested in either, but I grew up in Scientology. But I was curious about a lot of different things, so I explored a lot of different religions. But at age 18, I took a job at an art museum, and inside that art museum was an exhibit that was made of a temple, uh, a Shiva temple that had been disassembled and reassembled inside the museum with all the murtis uh, and the wood carvings, everything. It was really beautiful. But I was put in charge of basically standing around all day and answering questions about the art. That was my job at 18 in this museum. And we weren't allowed to sit down or read or do anything else. We were just allowed to walk around and stand around and answer people's questions. But there would be many days in the middle of the week where there were no visitors. And so I would just be wandering around among all of the statues of Shiva and Parvati. And what happened to me was I would drop into these intense trances. And 3, 4 hours would pass without me knowing. I would come out of them having no idea what time it was and seeing that 3 or 4 hours had passed. I went into a deep trance in this temple. And as I came out of it, the experience of bliss that I had and ecstasy that I had from that experience caused me to have spontaneous orgasms. So I'd go into these trances and come out with an orgasm. And I wondered what in the world had happened, because while I was in them, I had a sense that could only be experienced. It's very difficult to explain, but a sense of how existence itself works. And so I became very curious. Like, since this happened within a rebuilt Shiva temple, I started studying Hindu art in college. I went to Oxford's Hindu Studies distance classes, and I even joined an ashram later. What I learned is that that is called Shaktipat, where you have sudden realization of the way things work, the way the universe is created. And so I've taken that experience and added my intellectual understanding of Trika, Kashmir Shaivism, what I learned in the ashram. I learned a little Sanskrit, um, and I've put that together into the Devi doctrine so it can help others. And again, this can happen to anyone. Shaktipat can happen to anyone. A lot of the time it is given to you by a guru. Sometimes it happens spontaneously. So that's how my spiritual journey began. And I know that the animating energy, the animating vibration of all that exists materially, in thought, in spirit, is the divine feminine. And it comes from that which is not. She emerged from that which is not, which is the definition of Shiva, right? Shiva is absolute, timeless, without form. From that came Devi or Shakti. And there's an ancient myth, the Pelasgian myth of Genesis, basically, where the goddess of all things emerges. She divides things into the sky and the water. She dances and creates the snake, which is knowing, something to reflect upon her and know who she is. They make love. They create the egg of the universe. The snake wraps around it, and the egg bursts open, and everything that is created. So that was the first Genesis myth we know, which is incredible because it aligns so well with what I saw in Shaktipat. So I use that myth a lot, the Pelasgian myth of Uranome and Ophion, the serpent. The serpent represents the want to know. So our role here is to know Devi, to know her from our individual perspective.
Thank you. And now, if we go back to hierarchies, as you mentioned, if we were to break them down, how would society operate?
One of the things I like to talk about is hierarchy, which I see as masculine, versus the rhizome, which I see as feminine, and the alternative to hierarchy. So, rhizomes in biology are plants that their roots shoot out in all different directions. And then they have bits of them come up through the surface. And they are networked. So if you think about the connections in the brain, neuroconnections, if you think about the internet, if you think about that kind of mapping, that is what is feminine organization. And a lot of the structure is under the surface. You don't get to see it. And I think the reason that men are more attracted to or can't even conceive of a world without hierarchy has something to do with genitals. Their genitals are on the outside. They can see it. They see how it's organized. Ours are on the inside. So we don't have to see how things are organized to know how they function. So men tend to lean towards hierarchy and barely can even conceive of any kind of organization without it. I've found that's like one sticking point for men where they really, really have a hard time understanding organization without hierarchy. But it's underground. It's actually stronger than hierarchy because if you cut one little part off, the rest still continues to grow. And then that little part can actually keep growing in a different direction, in all different directions. So it's incredibly strong. It's incredibly resilient. I don't know if you've grown mint in your garden, but that's a rhizome. Basically, if you plant one small little mint plant, in a couple of years, it's going to take over your entire garden if you don't keep it pruned back. That's how rhizomes work, and that's how feminine organization works. Women tend to be more communal, cooperative, and make networks. And that is an advantage of matriarchy and gynarchy.
So, in this new society, what would be the role of men?
So, one of the misconceptions is that men who submit to women, men who bow down to women, who respect women, who worship women and adore women, that they're somehow lesser men. But I feel what's missing here, there's this false sense of masculinity where you have to be like dominant, in charge, everyone's below you, you're part of the hierarchy, you work your way up the hierarchy. I think that's a perverse version of masculinity. I actually think the natural masculine actually adores women, adores the feminine. I mean, that's sort of the most heterosexual thing you could do, right? Is to adore women, worship women, to want to please women, support women. I don't know how that is not seen as incredibly masculine, and also to protect and to provide structure. The wild feminine is all over the place, like a rhizome, like the mint in the garden. It just grows everywhere. With a trellis, which is how I view the masculine, with a trellis, it grows in a certain direction. It has a certain order. So men can provide that containment and order for the feminine. That's their role. And so they do that through actually listening to the big picture that women can present, their vision, and actually attending to the details and being masculine, taking risks for women, being the strong support. That's what the masculine is for. That is the definition of masculinity under gynarchy. The man is strong and supportive, and he adds structure, and he witnesses, like Ophion the snake. He is the witness to the divine feminine. He gives language to it. He gives mathematics to it, analytics. those sorts of things. So the structure and the supporting structure of the feminine is the masculine. That's what it was created for. And they're not equal opposites. The feminine is the energy that animates all things. The masculine is made of the feminine, but it's made to provide that support. So, as I said in my book, The Pillars of Gynarchy, I have laid out a blueprint of what I think society would look like, how we would deal with conflict, which is playfully. The feminine is very playful and active. Ideas of the feminine that we've heard about being soft and only nurturing, and no, the feminine is much more than that. It is soft, it is nurturing, but it's also playful, and it's also active, and it's also strong and mama bear and defense. Has great defense against incoming danger, and it's magnetic. The feminine is magnetic. So taking all of these things, as I did in my book, and laying out what society would look like. So we would have communities with a central woman or a central group of women, oracles I call them, who make all the major decisions, who present the vision of society or of that particular community. And all of them are linked through a network of other queens, other oracles, groups of oracles, and they share information and they share resources. There's a great book by Sherry S. Tepper. It is called The Gate to Women's Country. And this is how she has it laid out. I read this after I wrote The Pillars of Gynarchy, but she has it laid out so that there are these towns, Martha Town, Anna Town. There are these towns run by women, but when they have sons, they send them out to be defenders, warriors who live outside the town. But if they come back, those men are embraced by society. The men who live outside in the barracks are the defense system, and they have pretend wars. Anyway, it's very complicated, but she has it laid out like that. There are these nodes of different towns, and they're all run by women. And technology takes a very utilitarian role. There's not a lot of screen time and all that stuff. They have crafts that the women do. They have jobs that each of them do. A lot of them are trained in medicine. They're healers. All kinds of interesting points in this book. I really wish everyone could read it. It's a wonderful book.
I hope that everyone watching or listening, please do try to read it as well. Miss Viola, just could we have some final thoughts from you? What practical ways do you suggest we can bring about a gynarchy?
So economy, religion, home, community, these are ways we need to strengthen ourselves and pour our own values, be they matriarchal, gynarchal, into the world and create blueprints, create these prototypes to be copied, create nodes in the rhizome. So we have nodes that can then spring off, and we can share information together in these networks of nodes, of these small communities, and cover the earth and basically suffocate patriarchy. We don't need to fight. We don't need wars. We just suffocate it by creating the examples and letting that spread. That's all we need to do. I read somewhere that you need 3.5% of a population to make a giant cultural change. So if, 3 or 4% of us were gynarchists or matriarchs, then that would start to really take hold. That's all we need. We don't need to fight it. We don't need to smash the patriarchy. We need to suffocate the patriarchy. So yeah, visions of gynarchy, visions of matriarchy. I like the word gynarchy because not every woman wants to be a mother, and there's power in the feminine, whether you're a mother or not. You are the creative portal for the entire universe. So, gynarchic vision, that's what I'm all about. and I teach female led relationships to men and to couples. I have my classes at obedient.love and my books. You can go to gynarchy.io and you'll see all of my projects. Yeah, that's the vision. That's the vision. I've seen so many women embrace this right now. It's like I said, it's the pivot. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And yeah, I look forward to what your community does in the future.
That's it from us today, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And thank you, Miss Viola, for joining us and sharing your perspective with all of us. Do like, subscribe, share, and tell your friends about the podcast. And tune in next time for another exciting episode. Thanks, everyone.